You hear the screeching of an owl, you hear the wind begin to howl. You know there's zombies on the prowl, and it's terror time again. They've got you running through the night. It's terror time again, and you just might die of fright. It's a terrifying time.
Hello everyone, on today's issue of the Beginner Guide, we're covering farming more in depth than ever before to help give you a better understanding of how everything works. We'll be covering fertilizers, crop placement, crop types, and more. Now before we begin though, I'd like to thank you all for the support on each of these videos. Sincerely, thank you for the subs, the likes, and definitely the feedback. It's how I make these videos better. I'd also like to thank Foxfire for her lovely thumbnail in today's video. Be sure to support her down on Twitch and Twitter. Now let's dive in, shall we? First, let's talk what tools and equipment you're going to need to farm and what additional things that'll make your experience easier respectively. The bare basics you'll need to start your farm is something to sow the furrows with, water, and seeds. Now to sow furrows or crop fields, you're going to want either a trowel or a shovel. You can dig up fields with your bare hands, but there's a fairly high chance of your hands suffering injury. Otherwise, both of these tools will do the job just fine. Now, water is self-explanatory. It doesn't matter the source or if it's clean or dirty. As far as the crops care, they just want water. Now, the ideal vessel to use is the watering can, but anything that holds water can do the job. Personally, when I plant crops, I like to wait till it's just starting to rain, so the sky will do the initial watering for me of the fields, and I could save the time and resources it would take to water entire fields. And the final thing that you're absolutely required to have for farming, that's seeds, of course. You can't farm if you don't have any plants to put in the ground. Now these can be found in a variety of locations. Check hardware locations, kitchen cabinets. Some homes are home to farmers, tool sheds, or places like McCoy's, which are flush with a variety of resources that benefit the home farmer. Once you've found your seeds, keep in mind that they come in packs of 50, but each plant requires differing amount of seeds for each tilled spot of land. Now let's take a look at some of the less essential but still very beneficial pieces of equipment. First is books and magazines. Skill books in general are always useful and make each task that much more rewarding. Especially with farming, you only get XP when you successfully harvest the plant, and not any of the other various steps before that. Also keep in mind that some of the 6 p.m. or 1800 TV shows also cover farming, so tune in for that or find the VHS tape in game if you want to get some free levels. Now the Farmer's Magazine, while not essential to farming, will let you treat the various diseases that your crops can obtain. And speaking of that, the gardening spray can. You can fill these with recipes to treat both insects or mildew. Keep in mind to make these you're going to need a source of milk or cigarettes. And now the final luxury item for farming, fertilizer. There are two variants in game and they both act the same way. The only difference is how you obtain them. NPK fertilizer can be found in various hardware and farming areas, while sacks of fertilizer can be obtained using a composter and rotting food. Compost various foods that have gone to waste, and you can use these to breathe new life into your crops. Keep in mind they do take a few weeks to break down and give you the resources you need, however. Now what they do exactly is reduce the growing stage of each crop by 20 hours, so each application makes that stage faster by cutting off 20 off the end. Now if there's less than 20, it'll instantly jump to the next stage, but the extra hours will be wasted. A full bag of NPK fertilizer also yields 4 doses, so either spread them out or dump them on one plant to grow it really quickly. But keep in mind, too many doses, that being 4 or 5, will kill a plant, so don't overdo it. I'd say maybe a max of 3 on each plant. To make a composter, you'll need to have level 5 carpentry, 5 planks, and 4 nails. Once you got that, plop it down nearby to your farm and fill it up with excess or rotting food, and you just let it go to work. Another tip to make things easier is to set rain collector barrels nearby to your farms, so you're not having to walk back and forth long distances to water your crops. And they'll also fill whenever it rains, storing extra water for the fields for that inevitable dry spell. Now you've got your tools and supplies and you're ready to begin farming. Find or make a good open place with plenty of dirt. Till your soil, skipping 2 places between each plot. This will be explained why later. Once you've got all the furrows you need, pick your plant, crack open the seeds. Plant as many as you desire of each type. Satiate the initial water desires of each crop, and now it's time to wait. Keep them protected from the elements and the hordes, and let them grow. Farming is all about patience. It's all about that long game. It's what'll help keep you alive once all the easy sources of scavenged food is run out. Eventually, even if you lived forever fighting off all the zombies and scavenged everything, you will run out of food. Once all the food within the fridges and on the shelves have started to rot away, and you've opened the last can of beans. Now once you've got your crops, you can combine it with other methods of late game food capture to make highly varied, satiating, and happiness inducing meals. Now let's move on to each of the crops themselves, shall we? Within the vanilla game, there is 7 types of crops that all have their own growth times and water requirements in addition to the standard needs of all plants. Another thing I want to address before we cover each crop is the fact that each plant also has additional days after it's grown when it'll be in a seed-bearing plant, which means you'll be able to harvest it for seeds as well as the crop that you need to eat. Keep this in mind so you'll have more seeds for the next generation. You don't want to eat them all, do you? Now let's cover each plant from the fastest growing to the slowest, shall we? First off the bat is the humble cabbage. This plant grows on average from seed to ready to harvest in 14 days, with an additional day required to be seed bearing. Cabbage is an excellent crop, not only due to its fast turnover rate, but also the fact it's one of 2 crops not hindered by the winter, the other being the humble potato. It also needs 9 seeds per plot. The only detriment is it also requires a higher level of hydration to be maintained to stay healthy and happy compared to some of the other plants. Now carrots are next, with a 15-day turnover as well as an additional day or 2 before it's seed bearing and requiring 12 seeds a plot. Now keep in mind carrots require more water in the starting stages of growth, but once in the later stages require less water than other crops to be maintained. Next up the bat is the radish. This takes on average 17 days and a few more to become seed bearing. This plant requires 6 seeds per plot, and they also have the same water requirement stages as carrots. Now personally, I don't bother with radishes as their moderate growth times, combined with the fact they have nearly no nutritional benefits, really handicaps their overall usefulness. The best case, they're a filler to meals, but that's about it. Now our first fruit on the list is the humble strawberry. This baby requires 22 days to grow and 12 seeds per plot. But one benefit of this plant, however, is the fact that when you pick the fruit, it doesn't destroy the plot. Instead, it resets the plant back to its seedling phase, which is a nice benefit. Plus, it couples nicely to add more variety to late game fruit salads. The next crop and our last fruit is the ubiquitous tomato. Requires 26 days until it's ready to harvest, and at one of the lowest seed costs of 4 seeds a plot. One packet of seeds really goes a long way to sow an entire field with this. But coming up next, however, is one of the most useful crops on the entire list. That's right, the potato. While it does take 26 days to grow, it only requires 4 seeds as well as the tomato, is one of the slowest crops to go stale and rot, and it's the other crop that can survive the harsh cold winters no problem. If you can wait out this long wait, it'll keep you sustained for the long run. And the final crop is the broccoli, at 30 days and needing 6 seeds a plot. This is also one of my least used plants, as its long growth period just doesn't have enough trade-offs to tip it off into its favor of using. This just about covers all the vanilla crops that you could farm, so let's talk about the farming skills itself and what it offers you in exchange for grinding it up to the top. So let's talk about the farming skill itself. Now for character creation, you've got two options. You can either take the farmer profession, which will give you 3 levels of farming, which is enough to boost farming XP gains to 125%. This is a 100% increase over the base 25%, a damn respectable increase. And it also gives you the ability to make the insecticide and mildew sprays without locating the farmer's magazine. And it even leaves you 2 skill points left over you could allocate to a minor trait if you don't want to take any negative traits. But this also means you'll have next to no actual valuable skills in the early game. You'll have no combat skills, no early game relevant skills like carpentry, the barricade, and build up your base with the equipment you'll need to sustain yourself late game, or like building those rain collector barrels early. Personally, if you want to boost, I'd recommend you instead take the gardener trait at a cost of 4 points. Sure, it only gives you 1 point of farming, but it'll still triple the rate you gain farming XP, while also giving you those recipes and leaving your profession open to a more valuable job, such as say handyman or carpenter. Now what does farming do for you in gameplay? It gives you information, kinda like I'm doing. The higher your skill level in farming, the more information you can see about the plant's health levels and water levels, if the plant's diseased and what disease it has, and what stage the plant has currently grown to. Now, as stated, you only get XP when you successfully harvest a plant, but there's also another wrinkle to this. If a plant is diseased when you harvest it, depending on how severely, it reduces how much XP you gain from each harvest. So consider curing the disease if you have the resources and you want the higher XP yields. Now let's cover some of the hardships you'll have to overcome with farming in the next section, shall we? With farming, you have 3 immediate threats that your plants will face at all times. This would be disease, zombies, and hydration. Your most immediate threat at all time will always be zombies. If your farm isn't properly protected with walls or placed in an isolated area where no zombies would stumble across them, you run the risk of your hard work being quite literally trampled into the ground. So take some precautions and put your plot somewhere safe. I'd recommend you either base somewhere isolated, wall off your farm and use doors to enter and exit, or consider a rooftop garden. Rooftop gardens can be made using sacks filled with dirt to place the dirt up on the higher levels. With this, the only way your crops could be trampled is if your entire base is being overrun. And if that's the case, you've got bigger problems to worry about than your plants. Now, threat 2 is disease. This is your next most pressing issue. You will constantly have to keep an eye on your crops for any signs of illness, and if you're a low-level farmer, then visuals will be the only thing you have to go off of. The best way to limit the damage of disease is to properly place your plots from one another. The proper placement for limiting spread of disease is 2 blocks on each side. So place a plot, skip 2 spaces, place 1, skip 2. This way you limit the possibility of disease spread. And if you plant the right crops, you really don't need an insane amount of plots to sustain yourself long term. Now, worst case, you do catch some plant diseases. There's 3 potential diseases facing you. You've got mildew, insects, and devil's water fungi, or DWF for short. Mildew is the least dangerous of the 3 as it just slows your plant's growth. To combat this, create a mildew spray using a gardening spray can and an entire carton of milk. Now, insects are a bit more nasty as they'll make your infected plants require more water, which will force you to divert your attention to them more often to keep them satiated. To combat this, create an insecticide spray using 3 units of water, a gardening spray can, and 5 cigarettes. This will kill off the little buggers. Now, the final disease, DWF, is the most pressing of issues. This only occurs on plants that you let fester with the other illnesses and didn't treat. There is no in-game cure for these, and this decreases your crop yields and can spread effectively to other crops. If your plant isn't nearly done and ready to harvest, you're best off just uprooting the infected plant or plants before it spreads and destroying the plague at its root. Now, the final threat comes in the form of hydration. I say hydration, not just dehydration, as yes, some plants can be overwatered and suffer damage, these being the carrot and radish. You want to keep these at a maximum of 65 and 85 water units respectively, if you don't want them to drown and die. You'll also have to worry about rain overwatering them, so consider if you farm these plants doing so in an indoor farm. But in my eyes, that's just yet another reason to not grow radishes. Now for every plant, however, you also have to worry about underwatering the plants as well. If they don't meet the minimum water level shown on this chart on screen, they'll also start to suffer damage until they wither and die. Keep between these thresholds and you should be good. With these 3 threats dealt with, now all you can do is wait for them to grow and keep them well maintained. I think this just about covers everything a player needs to know to get started with a farm, and I hope I've taught you everything you desire to help you keep alive via farming. Remember, farming's about patience. It isn't quick like fishing, and it isn't as instant as foraging, but it can go on indefinitely. And even when the weather has caused other methods to weaken or fail, your farmed goods will keep you going, especially if you preserve what you need via jarring or freezing them to last the long haul. And hey, anything that does go to waste, compost it for the next generation of plants. Now before I go, I'd like to thank you for watching this video. It sincerely helps. I'd also like to thank you for all the support, all the subs, and I hope you'll also be sure to check out today's artist Foxfire and support her down below. She does great work and is entertaining on Twitch, and she's an awesome person. This has been Core, and I'll see you next time.